So I guess this is it. Okay.
Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I am grateful for the opportunity to contribute to the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2020 and offer my sincerest congratulations to all those who have worked so diligently to get us to this most momentous occasion in the history of local government reform in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Vice President, as my colleagues before me have indicated, we have been consulting and collaborating on local government reform in Trinidad and Tobago for a while now. And if ever there was a time to give it the final stamp of approval, that is now. Mr. Vice President, there's an unfortunate tendency for us to continue responding to the opposition's continuous charade of shifting goalposts. And this can only have one effect: the inability to enact sufficiently robust and progressive legislation that would lead to an enhancement in the quality of life of our citizens. I observed that Senator Jayanti mentioned that the government does not want the opposition, doesn't want to hear from the opposition. At no point did I hear anyone say that, because we have been listening. As a minority report was submitted, and the prevailing sentiment of that minority report, Mr. Vice President, and indeed much of the commentary that has come from the opposition bench in recent times stems from an apparent inability to trust not just the people of Trinidad and Tobago, but apparently to trust themselves as well. Nowhere was this evident than in the recent debate to replace one of the last remnants of our colonial past with something unique to our own experience. Mr. Vice President, we are saying it is time to let go of our colonial past, but yet the members of the opposition prefer that we hold on to it and remain wedded and beholden to those wearing powdered wigs sitting thousands of miles away from us. And the same is true for local government reform. We have debated this for decades. We have consulted far and wide. The Parliament library is filled with white and green papers prepared and presented over the years. 1,000,001 trees have been sacrificed to produce reams and reams of paper containing the fruits of those deliberations and consultation. And yet, we still have an opposition that is insisting upon even more consultation. When will this charade end, Mr. Vice President? Well, as for me and my colleagues, the charade should end today. Local government reform will become a reality, and the people of Trinidad and Tobago must be the proud beneficiaries. Because, Mr. Vice President, all politics is local. Local government and its practitioners are what touches the lives of everyday citizens on an everyday basis. From the time you open your eyes in the morning to the time you touch down and sleep at night, local government is at the heart of your every moment. And I want to commend the Minister of Agriculture. You know, his speech was very touching when he spoke about him being a councillor, an alderman, how he started in the corporation to become a mayor, to become the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, and I want to congratulate him for his service to Trinidad and Tobago. You see, because it is local government that approves your building plans, that is responsible for garbage collection, cleaning up the drains around your houses, spraying for mosquitoes and getting rid of other vermin. Local government is also responsible for the play parks and recreation grounds, and even the cemeteries where we bury our loved ones. And it is for this reason that all of us should feel insulted by the ignorance displayed by some members of the opposition, as they commented on the roles and functions of local government. Mr. Vice President, imagine a senior member of the opposition would go on record to say that local government is about CPEP and stray dogs. And if that was not insensitive enough, I heard another one who was at one point an alderman describing local government as just getting your drains clean and little labas people. As I perused the appendices that accompanied the JSC report, I could not help but come to the conclusion that there is some dissonance between the views expressed by some senior members of the UNC, who I just alluded to, and to their own members on the ground. Because I want to speak about the written comments of the chairman of the Sandy Grande Regional Corporation and the chief executive officer of the Kuva Tabakit Talpara Regional Corporation, both of which are controlled by the opposition. And their comments are instructive. In the case of the Sandy Grande Regional Corporation chairman, Anil Roberts, in written correspondence to the JSC, he stated, and I quote, "We perused the updated amendment on the Miscellaneous Provisions, Local Government Reform Bill 2020, and considered all changes. We look forward to working with it when it is approved by the Parliament." The CEO of the Kuva Tabakit Talpara Regional Corporation had this to say, and I quote, "Please be informed that the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2020 was reviewed by the Kuva Tabakit Talpara Regional Corporation, and upon in-depth perusal, it was derived that there are no comments to be made with respect to the bill," end of quote. And these comments can be found in Appendix 11 of your committee's report. Madam President, I compared these comments from the two UNC-controlled corporations with the opposition's minority report, and simply asked all members of the opposition in this House to at least agree with the members of your party who see local government reform as a good thing, and they are looking forward to it. Mr. Vice President, there are many other UNC councillors who are in support of local government reform, as I was told, and they are silently supporting this bill. Today, I want to pay tribute to all the hard-working councillors and aldermen in our country. Irrespective of their political affiliation, who continue daily to service the needs of their burgesses. More often than not, they are the first ones on site. They are the ones who are better known by residents. They are the ones who are more accessible to the residents. Mr. Vice President, I hasten to add that this is not an indictment on any member of Parliament, but merely an honest appreciation for the sterling work that is performed by these councillors and aldermen, often with little show for it. And when I think of persons like Councillor Terry, also known as Martin Rondon, who has served the people of Toko Martelat as a councillor for 25 years, and I understand that he has served in the corporations for over 40 years. So when I think about him demitting office without being able to benefit from a pension, it pains me immensely. And Terry is not the only one. I am certain in every regional and borough corporation there are numerous councillors, past and present, who have given their lifeblood to local government and who have retired or are about to retire and will go home with nothing but a handshake. And this is neither fair nor just. And this local government reform bill before this House today has the ability to change that. We, as a member of this august body, have a golden opportunity by uttering one word, yes, to change the lives of our councillors and, by extension, the people they represent. Mr. Vice President, there are countless local government councillors laboring in the vineyards, and this report and the accompanying bill finally recognizes the immensity of their contribution. This bill legitimizes what already exists in reality, and that is the employment of councillors on a full-time basis, and now provides pathway for the brightest and the best that communities have to offer to see politics as a viable career. The end result of this is the creation of a position that offers some security of tenure, that offers a decent salary as opposed to the stipend currently paid to councillors and aldermen, and the harmonization of the terms and conditions of those positions with that currently enjoyed by secretaries and assemblymen of the Tobago House of Assembly. The bill offers a clear organizational structure that will professionalize the operations of our regional and municipal corporations, to the point where persons with specific qualifications and experience can now be appointed to the Executive Council and so add to the storehouse of creativity available to the constituents. Mr. Vice President, the paradigm shifts that are contained in Clause 3 of this bill revolutionizes the way in which local government and its practitioners are treated. All of our local government councillors, upon completion of their tours of duties, go home without a pension because what they received during their terms of office was an honorarium and not a negotiable remuneration package. So for all the years that Terry Rondon has given to the burgesses of the Sandy Grande Regional Corporation and the constituents of Toko Matila, to be specific, when he retires from the political realm, he does so with nothing except the good wishes and prayers of those whose lives he would have touched. And Terry is not alone in this scenario, as there are councillors on all sides of the political aisle to whom this travesty applies. The proposed legislation before us will, at long last, provide a remedy for that injustice, Mr. Vice President. In moving the term of office from 3 to 4 years as well, the government harmonizes and flattens the curve existing between assemblymen at the THA and local government councillors in Trinidad. The creation of an executive council that is separate and apart from the municipal council is also a feature of this bill that pushes it squarely into the realm of the 21st century politics. In determining the composition of the executive council, the mayor or chairman has the latitude to appoint persons with specific skills and competencies as secretaries to spearhead specific divisions, something which is not now possible. I want to speak a little bit about financial autonomy. One of the most fundamental changes emanating out of the proposed bill before us is the conferring of financial autonomy on the regional and municipal corporations. The ability to retain specific taxes collected within the boundaries of the respective corporations, placing them in a position to determine their own spending and saving patterns. Mr. Vice President, not only does this make sense on a very practical level, but it also makes sense from a wider governmental perspective. And I've heard my colleagues opposite argue, for example, that this is government wants to get its hand on everything and to have its fingers on every pie. But this aspect of local government reform extricates central government from that process to a very large extent and places the onus on the respective corporations. Additionally, the argument as advanced that this is a surreptitious and roundabout way of introducing property tax is both ridiculous and disingenuous. Because, Mr. Vice President, the opposition members speak through both sides of their mouth, because the same ones who are arguing against the property tax and launch their infamous Axe the Tax campaign also saw the value in it and was going to implement it. There are some members stood up clearly and said that they do not support the property tax, but I want to remind them, hear what the Minister of Finance, Mr. Larry Hawaii, had to say during the 2013-2014 budget presentation. And he said, and I quote, "Mr. Speaker, a land and building tax regime is a key pillar in all modern tax systems. Recurrent land and building taxes meet all the conditions of a good and fair tax. The backbone of a successful land and building tax is the proper valuation of properties within a transparent framework. And this will require the property rules being brought up to date And I propose to phase in those taxes over the period 2014 to 2017, during which time the properties will be valued and consultations will be held with all stakeholders. End of quote. And he also said, and I quote, in phase one, and effective immediately, we shall commence valuations of all industrial land, including plant and machinery, whether housed or unhoused, with a view to implement this tax by July the 1st, 2014. In phase two, we will impose a tax on commercial properties, and in phase three, we will impose a tax on agricultural lands and on residential properties with a deductible allowance to provide relief to certain agricultural land owners and low-income homeowners. And that's end of quote. So, Mr. Vice President, the then Minister of Finance, Mr. Hawaii, sought to hide the word property in some of what he was saying here by saying these taxes and this tax and or a tax. So there is no denying that it is still property tax. You see, because at the end of the day, they cannot be trusted. Many of the members of the UNC, I understand, who have properties in foreign countries, religiously pay their property tax for the homes they own, yet they are speaking against it in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Vice President, by carefully analyzing the quantum of income regional and municipal corporations are likely to receive from property taxes, they are in a much better position to plan their annual work programs, to determine how many persons they can employ, how many projects they can undertake, without having to receive any approval from central government. So you see, this level of fiscal independence will undoubtedly mute the annual cries of geographic discrimination emanating from the other side, leaving me to conclude that rather than rejoice at this development, they would prefer not to see it happen, hence their refusal to support the committee's final report. There were some concerns about decentralization that was spoken about from Senator Lakshmi Dayal. The experience from jurisdictions around the world demonstrates in no insignificant way that decentralization of the decision-making process and devolution of authority, when properly implemented, is one of the most powerful and effective tools to reduce poverty and inequality, accelerate rural development, and enhance the participation of citizens in their own development. Multiple studies of decentralization in Tanzania, Uganda, Indonesia, and India, among others, have all highlighted the positive impact that decentralized administrations can have on unlocking the potential of regions, improving services to people, and stimulating citizen participation in decision-making. When administrative decentralization is matched with fiscal decentralization, Trinidad and Tobago will be able to find a path to accelerated and sustained local development, bringing long-term benefits to citizens who live in all regional and municipal corporations. And this, Mr. Vice President, is the best way to ensure that no one is left behind. There's another critical area of decentralization for which the attached bill provides a remedy. This is the area of staffing of the various corporations. This government spends approximately $2.4 billion on staffing for local government. And it is not a matter of telling tales out of school to say that there's always the question of whether the citizens are receiving a sufficiently robust return on their investment. And I am informed that most corporations are understaffed, conservatively by 20%, because of the lengthy delays by the relevant service commissions appointing staff. And I heard some members spoke about the bureaucracy. This dysfunction has been institutionalized for years, and the underperformance of corporations has been normalized. The reform envisaged in the attached bill before this chamber closed the municipal council with the authority to hire additional staff deemed necessary for the proper execution of the sum of obligations now expected to be fulfilled by the corporation. The consequent authority to discipline staff is also included in the 12th schedule, as well as the requirement to ensure that due process is followed in all cases of discipline. Mr. Vice President, there are approximately 750 municipal police officers on active duty across the length and breadth of this country. Additional persons are to be hired to increase the number to 1,500. In the existing structure of local government, municipal police officers receive instructions from the already beleaguered Chief Executive Officer of the respective corporations. And Mr. Vice President, someone was telling me that as far as they are concerned, the sole function of the majority of these trained municipal police officers is to watch the tractors and other vehicles lodged on the compounds of the various corporations. And these officers are not allowed to respond to reports of domestic violence, larceny, and other crimes in the community. So in other words, truth be told, some of them may just be operating as daylight security officers at most corporations. But within the context of the reform of local government, the municipal police will now be placed under the jurisdiction of the municipal council and will be heavily engaged in community policing, and which is something we at the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services applaud. Because, Mr. Vice President, about 35% of the homicides committed in this country have their genesis in domestic violence and land disputes. Data from the National Domestic Violence Registry show that assault by beating, verbal abuse, malicious damage, and breach of protection orders are by far the most common offenses associated with domestic violence. And these have increased by over 30% in some cases. For example, assault by beating doubled in 2021 from 451 reported cases in 2019 to 522 in 2020 to 1,333 in 2021. And as of February this year, there's a figure of 187. But sadly, it must be noted that these are only reported cases by domestic violence victims. The reality is that there are numerous unreported cases. So we have the view that the devolution of those powers to the municipal council will result in the municipal police being more visible in the community and thus be able to make earlier interventions, therefore stemming the tide of familial murders. And we would see that even in our society today, there is a great increase in family violence. A great increase in family violence. A lot of murders that have been committed recently was family members against each other. Municipal police officers visibly patrolling the community will have the opportunity, of course, to collaborate with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to implement proactive strategies to combat domestic violence, family violence, school violence, juvenile delinquency, robberies, gang violence, drug use in communities, thus to help maintain social disorder and supporting healthy and safe communities. And through the specialized training they will receive in mediation, developing, promoting, and implementing strategies and programs to public safety within their local district and for solving neighborhood problems, they will be equipped to serve the purchases of their municipal corporations. So, Mr. Vice President, the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services is responsible for the protection and enhancement of the rights and dignities of the most vulnerable persons in our country. One such vulnerable group is street dwellers. The health and well-being of street dwellers continue to be of utmost importance to us. Street dwelling is a major issue in this country, and in particular at the levels of the city and borough corporation. It therefore requires an integrative and collaborative approach. And I always say, I remind people that the Ministry of Social Development on its own cannot move persons off the street. It requires a collaborative approach between the municipal corporations, the Ministry of Health, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Mental Health Department. All of us have to come together to assist in moving persons off of the street. And so I'm very happy with regards to this bill, with regards to the help of the municipal police. Acknowledging this level of partnership is required. The municipal police can be actively utilized to help with the move-along mechanism that would see street dwellers taken off the street, assessed, rehabilitated and transitioned back into society. And this type of partnership can result in the government successfully tackling the issue of homelessness in this country. Under Clause 3 of the bill, municipal police will be given the legal right to issue tickets under the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Enforcement and Administration Act. And this is another significant aspect of policing, and it provides an avenue that is available for the raising of funds through fines. Mr. Vice President, the final point I wish to raise with respect to the sweeping benefit of this proposed legislation concerns the potential for widening the digitalization net and therefore narrowing the digital divide existing in this country. Many of us are painfully aware of the slow pace in which requests for approvals move to the local government system. And this is so largely due to heavily manual processes, which many have taken years to perfect. The sheer weight of that bureaucracy, with its offspring of inefficiency and lengthy delays, it is haven for corrupt and breeding ground for corruption. And I mentioned that the Minister of Agriculture spoke about the bureaucracy also. The Senator Varma Deyalsingh spoke about the bureaucracy. And this digitalization will assist in this process. And through digitalization, payments for permits, applications for planning, verification of works to be done can be done online. So the market vendor will no longer have to go to the corporation to line up by a cashier, only to realize the cashier did not come to work because of COVID-19. The homeowner or contractor anxious to get their building drawings approved will also be able to have this done online, thus saving precious time and money. This also means that a greater number of persons can access an even wider range of services in quick time. This, Mr. Vice President, is how this government has approached local government reform, not in a piecemeal approach, but holistically and comprehensively. And we are bringing services closer to the people. Mr. Vice President, in closing, I just want to state that it is only the People's National Movement that has the vision and courage to advance groundbreaking local government reform. Trinidad and Tobago's continued development as a modern, progressive, democratic, and organized country will only occur when those entrusted with the responsibility of leadership are able to put aside partisan and parochial interests in favor of the common good. Every senator in this chamber took a solemn oath to do all within their power to serve the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And we have the opportunity at the conclusion of this debate to live out that oath and serve our country by supporting the adoption of this report. The time has come to emerge from the inefficiency that has enveloped local government. The benefits that will accrue to the citizenry of this great republic through the adoption of this JSC report far outweighs any perceived flaws in its construction, and therefore, I urge all of us to give it our support. Thank you.
Senator Josh Drayton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, for this opportunity to contribute to this debate on the Miscellaneous Provision Local Government Reform Bill. As one of the final speakers in this debate, I wish to share some of my thoughts without having to repeat much of what has gone before. There are different schools of thought with respect to discussing administrative reform. One of those schools speaks to structure. The other speaks to culture. First today, there's this tightrope that we're going to walk on as to whether instituting an appropriate structure would lead to change a specific kind of culture within local government. Some may say that this is a chicken and egg scenario. Which one do we do first? When we speak of local government, typically there are two sub-concepts that are used. Local government as the institutional framework, the what, and local governance as to the how. When we speak to local government, the institutional framework, we speak to the structures, as I would allude to later down in my contribution. When we speak to the how, we're really talking about concepts such as participatory democracy, deepening the connection between citizens and representatives. We also speak about local relevance, because each municipality or region would have some level of relevance to the community in which they serve. I also want to speak about accountability, which seems to be a common thread in the contribution so far. And how far do we go with accountability? There have been quite a bit of references made to corruption, abuse of resources, inefficiencies. And these have led to, of course, issues related to productivity, questions related to competency, and they affect the function of local government. This bill before us, and to my mind, can be reduced to three main components and represent some good first steps in being able to effectively execute local government reform. It is noteworthy that local government reform has had many iterations over the past decades, as alluded to by several senators prior. And this step, in no doubt, is one of several required for full transformation of local government. So it is in that context that I position my contribution. The key elements of this bill, to my mind, relate to harmonization of the structure of municipalities, inclusion of the tax collection regime, and regional development program and related oversight. With respect to the harmonization of the structure type, we see a shift to the role and function of mayor, deputy mayor, again alluded to by several speakers prior, and the establishment of an executive council which has a similar structure function as a mini cabinet, as we can call it. The focus of these executive secretaries range from the environment to planning, and specifically there's one on corporate services. There's a conflict, however, with respect to 33B in this legislation. But before I go into 33B, I want us to note that in 33B, the municipal corporation, BJ, is allowed to create and establish organizational structures for the corporation. But then when we skip ahead to the executive council, 33H2, we see a corporation shall, with the approval of the minister with responsibility for finance and consultation, the minister review its organizational structure. It's interesting to me because if we're saying that the whole entity, which is a municipal corporation, has the ability to create and establish its organizational structure for the corporation, why then do we have a situation where the minister with the responsibility for finance has to review the organizational structure? It seems to me that perhaps some clarity needs to be provided there. In terms of accountability, I was very curious as to some of the comments made by some senators with respect to local government not having, in this proposal, an accountability mechanism. So I will turn over to 69.5, where, and it starts with 4 and then goes into 5, that every corporation shall establish an audit committee, something that the previous legislation does not have. And some of the roles and functions of that audit committee include things such as risk management, internal controls, compliance requirements, internal audits, and a very interesting G which says other relevant functions including review of the corporation governance arrangement performance framework relevant to parliamentary committee reports and recommendations. So to me, in my mind, there's an inclusion of an accountability mechanism to assist the municipalities in being able to address some of those gaps referred to in the Auditor General's reports, or the lack of those reports. However, I have a question related to that. Whose responsibility is it to ensure that there are reports submitted to the Auditor General? As we know, the Auditor General is a constitutional or constitutionally enshrined independent entity and reports to Parliament. So the question here is, with a lack of reporting by municipalities, regional corporations, etc., who's responsible for this lack of reporting? Yes, there's a requirement for them to report, but who is responsible for monitoring and holding them to account? To me, it seems as though that's a responsibility for Parliament, the Public Accounts Committee. So that's another question that I guess we have to address as to why that committee may not have been efficiently functioning to ensure that these reports have been submitted. I also appreciate the involvement of civil society into this specific audit committee. Looking at 5, the audit committee shall comprise, and it goes further to speak to civil society organizations, and this is on C, 2 members of civil society, 1 from civil society and 1 from the Central Audit Unit of the Ministry of Finance. So it seems as though you can have either 2 members of civil society or at least 1 member from civil society and 1 from the Central Audit Committee of the Ministry of Finance. That provides a good review mechanism for civil society involvement. The challenge that we may have, and this is putting on some civil society hats now, that civil society in some instances may not be as easily organized around some of these issues. So that then puts the challenge on civil society organizations to bring themselves to a place where they can arrange within the region, whether it's a community-based organization or faith-based or an NGO or nonprofit, to then create a mechanism independent of government in this instance, and then propose a member. So I think that how this person or entity is selected may need some working out in terms of who will be these civil society representatives, how are they selected. But I do believe that this is an excellent opportunity for civil society based on those regions to arrange themselves in a way that can offer meaningful contribution to in this instance, monitoring and evaluation of government activities. I know that there have been several comments related to pushing the buck. The challenge, as I mentioned at the beginning, related to administrative reform, public sector reform, and the like, is that it's a very long and slow process. It is not something that can be done immediately, unfortunately, because there are competing interests, groups, etc., that would have a part to play. And that's why, in this very brief contribution, I have summarized that this is good first steps. But I understand the balancing act, which is you're damned if you don't, and you're damned if you do. So the question is whether inaction is, weighed the same way as action. And of course, that's what we would have to contemplate at the end of today, or at some point. But I think that a lot more could be done as things evolve. Mention was made by Senator Cox related to the use of technology. Technology is one of the key areas that municipalities across the world, primarily in the Commonwealth. There's a group called the Commonwealth Local Government Forum. You can see quite a bit of their initiatives. And one of them is to use technology as a mapping tool to figure out where there are issues. Years ago, and it still is in existence, there was this app that was created called Fix My Street in the UK. And what it did was to put together geographical mapping with an accountability mechanism. i.e., if there was a pothole, that particular app allowed citizens to take a picture, have the geolocation placed on a publicly available website, and when that matter was addressed, it closes the loop. The accountability loop. So for me, it's not always where we need to legislate citizen engagement, but there are activities that can be done to facilitate the co-creation of initiatives by citizens as well as their representatives. So that's one tool that you can use. There are several others. In Jamaica, also a couple of years ago, so I'm showing you how we probably need to catch up, and we will. In Jamaica, they used the open data tools, again, geolocation tools, to identify various sporting facilities, cricket fields, football fields, etc. So there was the map of Jamaica. You hover over each one of those facilities, and you were able to tell several things. One, what condition it was in. You already had the location, so you can plug that into, of course, your ways, etc. Two, who was responsible for it, because we do know there are issues of boundaries. Three, who to contact. So what it did again, it brought together government initiatives and citizens. So I think a lot can be done on the technological front. That's not in this bill, and it, to play around, I guess we have to figure out whether it's something that require legislation or whether it can be dealt with otherwise. So these are some of the initiatives. There were concerns around a lack of a mechanism for citizens to interact with the municipalities. if we were to reflect on our experience here, what existing mechanisms do we have? Because I think we have to be careful as to how much do we legislate the role of a councillor, whose role is to represent and to facilitate that engagement, so that town hall meetings and structures are important, but there's also that need for councillors to continue to do their work. So I'm on the fence with some of those recommendations related to how much do we legislate the role of representatives, and representatives in this instance being councillors, etc., but across the board. But I do believe that there's a role for, or mechanism required for citizen participation in various ways, which beyond as listed here with respect to the audit committee. So in closing, I would like to say, Mr. Vice President, that it's a lengthy bill, and I only got to it on Friday, so I was able to do a bit of reading on it. But I think that based on what I have seen and some colleagues that I have consulted with, it's a good first step by the government, but this should not be the only step or the final step. So with those few words, Mr. Vice President, I thank you.
Senator Anil Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Once again, the PNM has gotten it wrong because their vision, the vision of the PNM under their Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, is one of a new society where the population is told to wean themselves off of the government. The government is unable to serve them, to take care of them, and the society must take care of itself. And once again, this bill espouses that vision, because here an attempt being made with all sorts of descriptions that do not pan out when you read the bill about serving the people and getting service to the citizens and providing service, but the bill puts more hands in the power of the government than towards the people. Have no fear. The United National Congress, when we remove this PNM government, will serve the people and will get the local government reform correct, because of the vision of the UNC is about the people, building from the ground up, not from the cabinet down. All government speakers here for the last two sessions have spoken about in-depth consultation. The problem is with the definition of consultation. The PNM's definition of consultation is to meet with thousands of people, take an inordinate amount of time, take copious notes, print lots of copies of statements made by citizens across Trinidad and Tobago, and then ignore everybody and do what they want. That is not consultation. Consultation must be reflected in the end product for it to have any meaning. It was a pleasure to listen to the Honorable Minister of Social Development in a contribution today. She tried to skillfully weave into a tapestry of her argument that there were members of the UNC who support this PNM legislation here today. And she used one example as the CEO of the Couva Tabaqui Talparo Corporation, not letting the population know that CEOs are not politically appointed, CEOs are not politically affiliated, they are appointed by the institutions. And these institutions have been influenced by the PNM for 49 years. The Minister of Social Development also said that she heard some silent UNC support. Well, that is amazing. There's a new Marvel movie starring the Minister of Social Development, who can hear silence. That's a lovely one. The land and building tax was being brought by the UNC, not the property tax. The Honorable Minister of Social Development quoted from the then Minister in the People's Partnership Government, Larry Hawaii, and while she quoted the correct words from the Hansard, she skillfully ignored the fact that there is a difference between a land and building tax and the position that has remained constant of the United National Congress, that we stand firmly against the PNM property tax due to the inordinate, exorbitant system that is used in an unfair and equitable manner to create the tax per house. So the UNC is against your PNM tax, your punitive property tax, your oppressive, exorbitant tax. The UNC is for fair land and building taxes. So that is just to correct the record. Furthermore, when the UNC is in government, while no citizen ever enjoys or likes to pay a tax, when the UNC is in government, the population is not vehemently opposed to paying taxes because the UNC government performs for the people, serves the people, creates jobs, improves infrastructure, and ensures that services improve, creates foreign direct investment, and the country moves forward in a safe, organized manner. So people are more willing to pay tax. Unlike a system right now under this PNM where nothing functions, everything is in a state of collapse. So it's like West Indies cricket, collapso cricket. They said that the UNC has houses in foreign countries. Well, I'm glad they know who has houses in foreign countries and they're so willing to pay taxes. I wonder if they know that their former Minister of National Security, who was in New York trying to get $1 million gift that was given to him, if he paid his property tax on the elder person who he took the $1 million apartment from in Manhattan. Furthermore, if you're in a foreign country and you pay taxes, it's because in developed countries where the buses run, they don't have potholes busting your tires and your shocks, where you can get service. Crime is not rampant, men not dancing with Uzis while you're laying flat on your back being robbed, children not being stabbed in their face while going to school. In other countries, people are more willing to pay tax because they are not blighted with the PNM. The Honorable Minister of Social Development said there are 756 municipal police. The PNM has been in government 7 years. But she alerted the country to the fact that there is a shortage of some 700 police officers. And yet in 7 years, the PNM has done nothing to increase that complement. But they come here under the guise of local government reform, pretending that this is necessary in order to increase police and the people, the police officers out there to protect the people. This bill is not necessary for the PNM to do that. Maybe the Minister of Social Development also should whisper the truth in the ear of the Minister of National Security when he is awake, of course, because he insists that crime is down. Yet today, the honest Minister of Social Development came and said that crime is unfortunately high and requires a lot of work and needs more policing. The Honorable Minister of Social Development then said, with this local reform bill, we could have online services. We could get service on your plans, your outline approval, and so on online. Yet in this government, they cannot even do a tender for a central block in Port of Spain without a glitch, with only 3 companies, or really 2 and 1 extra one, putting in a bid. So how can the entire country depend on your online service when you cannot even do a tender process? The PNM is an amazing phenomenon. It convinces people and members of the party to cannibalize themselves politically, economically, spiritually, and administratively, and love it while they're doing it, praise it and promote it. Here we have a demoted AG espousing the remarkable opportunity afforded him by his diminution.
Senator Mark. Senator Anil.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Here we have a demoted AG espousing the remarkable opportunity afforded him by his diminution and now arguing for his complete removal from the cabinet while smiling and proudly sounding his own political demise. As I read from the Newsday...
Senator Roberts.
Yeah.
I beg for relevance, and I bring up 46.1, Standing Order 46.1, as it applies to this bill at hand.
Well, Mr. Vice President, this is quoted from the Honorable Minister of Local Government after his contribution in the local government bill, where he's discussing in the Newsday what he presented last week. So I believe that it is relevant. Thank you, sir. So Newsday, Wednesday, June 1st, 2022. It says, well, it should say Minister of Local Government, but Al-Rawi on local government reform. I am here to put myself out of a job. First and foremost, that sentence espouses the PNM's attitude. Here we are talking about devolution of power and responsibility and serving the burgesses and the citizens, but everything is about I and myself. But then to quote the Honorable Minister of Local Government and Rural Development, he said, in accepting the role as Minister of Local Government and Rural Development, my gazetted responsibilities included a very important item. My obligation is to wind up the affairs of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. In other words, then, I am here to put myself out of the job that is currently cast in the laws that we now manage. Take that baton and hand it over to the Ministry of Finance. And yet, Mr. Vice President, this government is coming here to tell the country that they've just devolved power. They've created opportunities for others. They've removed a minister who is passionate about it doesn't have to be this specific minister, but any minister of local government who is passionate about serving burgesses will be able to go in the cabinet. Anybody who understands our system, our constitution, our first past the post Westminster system knows that it requires a minister to go in cabinet with cabinet notes and fight with passion for resources for his or her ministry. To remove that minister in itself puts local government at the mercy of whoever is the Minister of Finance. And in this case, with this Minister of Finance who just came in the media review to say, oh, well, we did not pay VAT, we did not pay bills because I chose not to pay them. We got a windfall now and we are now going to pay bills. We can see that the corporations that are already starved for resources without a Minister of Local Government to argue for the case in cabinet will be at a disadvantage, as the Minister of Finance could do with them as he pleases without any argument, without any discussion. And that could never be good for democracy, good for service, and good for the allocation of resources across Trinidad. This bill here we are debating here goes against the very spirit of decentralization and contrary to the purpose and function of local government. In fact, the bill should be renamed a bill designed to consolidate power in the hands of the Minister of Finance and extend his control of the corporations in the name of local government reform, and furthermore, whatever is left over shall be controlled by the Minister of Local Government. I was amazed today to hear such adjectives from Independent Senator Dr. Remy as earth-shattering, groundbreaking, changing the way we do business, and then other adjectives from the Minister of Social Development as revolutionary. I thought I had read the wrong bill. I had to go and read it again in the caucus room to make sure that I had the correct bill, because none of these adjectives, even the Honorable Minister of Local Government and Rural Development in his contribution had to admit by situations beyond his control that he was not happy with this bill that he brought, that it's just a start, that because of the UNC's lack of support, he had to bring a watered-down bill, which is just, it's better to start than to do something. That was the essence of the Honorable Minister's presentation, and I don't think that that can be determined or described as groundbreaking and revolutionary. It can be described as capitulation. According to the OECD, there can be various political, administrative, and fiscal motives for decentralization reforms. In some countries, decentralization can be seen as a counter-reaction to previous strong centralization and even authoritarianism. Hugh et al., that was 2016. In these countries, decentralization has been at least partly a way to ensure that the democratization development will not be reversed. In other countries, decentralization has been a method to reform the public sector. For example, in order to improve the efficiency of public services and thereby curbing the growth of government spending, decentralization of authority is also often expected to result in more accountable, transparent public governance, lower corruption, higher political participation, and policy innovation. This is what we would have intended during the consultative process. But the bill, the end product that has come here today, does not decentralize, it does not devolve, it does not create an opportunity for those who are elected in local government and live in the areas to serve and have greater responsibility. It in fact puts more power into the hands of one minister, the Minister of Finance. So unfortunately, the PNM has missed the mark by a mile. When we talk about local government reform, we should be able to read from the clauses and the 101 amendments, not the 101 Dalmatians, that there should be political decentralization. The aims in general to devolve political decision-making power. That's the aim. But yet in this bill, we see the Minister of Finance, who is already powerful and all-encompassing, getting more power to deal directly with corporations. There should also be administrative decentralization. This transfers operational responsibility from a higher level to a lower level of organization. In this bill, we do not see that. What we also see is another level of interference with an executive council that is to be appointed and politically interfered with to move and to maneuver, while the burgesses and the people and the councillors will have to scramble for less resources without a ministry to fight on their behalf. According to the World Bank, one does not decentralize the civil service as an end in itself. One does so in order to provide services better, manage resources more efficiently, or support other general outcome goals. The civil service as a whole can be seen as one of the main instruments with which the government fulfills its obligation. In context of decentralization, this tool must often be reshaped in order to perform a new set of duties. But we are not reshaping. We are going backwards with this reform under the PNM. we see that there's an extension of the term. Councillor terms increased from 3 years to 4 years. Why? To exercise control for another year? I have not heard anyone explain in a rational, meaningful way what was the purpose of this extension. The Municipal Council, Section 33A, a corporation shall have a municipal council, an executive council, 33B. The municipal council of the corporation shall be responsible for, and they go through a whole list, making laws, formulating broad strategies, exercising oversight, and so on. And this is very interesting. This municipal council wields a tremendous amount of power and control over the duly elected local government representatives. And then this council is now faced with the awesome task of negotiating and discussing, approving budgets, and then going directly to the Minister of Finance without the buffer and support of a powerful Minister of Local Government. This does not augur well for resources getting to the people. Well, the property tax has been discussed, but not in this manner. So I will bring one other level of the property tax and the corporation fund. This PNM government has weaved an intricate web of oppression, control, and tyranny under the guise of local government reform. Section 77(1). The Board of Inland Revenue shall forward to each municipal corporation the names, addresses, and assess taxes of all taxpayers for residential land within the respective municipalities for the purpose of collection of the property taxes under Section 78. But Section 108(6) states, where estimates have been approved for use of a corporation for a particular year, and the corporation is in receipt of sums collected from property taxes for use by the corporation, the sums shall be offset from releases due to the corporation for that year. Offset. That is a very interesting position. This government does not want to incentivize and motivate workers, aldermen, mayors. They want to penalize. So when they collect, if they collect and they collect better than the BIR and they get a higher percentage of tax revenue in, they would actually be penalized. One would think, and I hope that this government, who is asking for the opposition's support, even though they don't need it because they watered down the bill and just need a special majority, I hope that they would amend that to say that if you should reward corporations for good tax collection and not take it away from the allocation, but add it so that they will be able to serve their constituents and their burgesses in a more meaningful manner. The mayor, the aldermen, and the councillors of a corporation shall be paid out of the fund of a corporation established under Section 109. 109(1)(a) states, the monies of a corporation fund under subsection 1 shall comprise of A, appropriations from Parliament from the consolidated fund, B, revenue from fees, charges, and fines and taxes, included property taxes, collected and distributed in accordance with the Property Tax Act, C, sums borrowed by the corporation for the 48 Chapter 7604 purpose of meeting of any of its obligations or discharging any of its functions. D, such sums as are provided by foreign states, international organizations, multilateral or bilateral lending agencies, corporations, or private institutions for the exercise of any functions of the corporation. E, sums received by or owed to the corporation in respect of 1, the performance of the functions or the exercise of its powers, or 2, interest or loans made to employees. F, taxes received by the corporation under Section 78, and G, such other sums or property which may in any manner become payable to or vested in the corporation in respect of any matter incidental to its functions. the PNM government has attempted to use this bill to institutionalize a Machiavellian enforcement of taxation and oppression of the people of this country. The PNM, for 7 years, has overseen what the Ministry of Finance calls the inefficiency of the BIR in promoting the politically influenced, recently passed to or sparked to life by the passage in the Senate, the Revenue Authority. That was the argument of the PNM, that the BIR is so inefficient. The Revenue Authority is needed for the minister to appoint a board and the general director and all the directors except one, but they must take the instruction from the PNM appointed board in collection of taxes. But now the PNM says in this callous property tax in a time of hardship that they have now turned municipal corporations into tax collectors. Think about that for a moment. These clauses are created. I have created a system in which the corporations will be coerced to enforce the property tax payment and collection upon the population by making the councillors, aldermen, and mayors dependent on said taxes for even their very salaries. In fact, the very funding of the corporations themselves will be coming from the funds acquired through property tax collection, as this bill does a set-off from original allocations, and allocations which would have diminished because there is no minister in the cabinet to fight for the corporations. So what are we doing here? We are creating a scenario where local government leaders, already starved of resources and now dependent on this property tax, which the opposition vehemently opposes in the PNM format, the PNM evaluation, and the PNM name. It is by its very nature oppressive. We are setting things in motion for all manner of abuses of power and dogmatic enforcement of this tax collection on a decentralized level. So the only thing the PNM has managed to decentralize is oppression. Essentially, you are forcing this property tax on the people by wielding a big stick over the corporations by telling them, all you oppose the tax, all you don't want the tax, all you tell the people don't pay the tax. Well, if you want your salary, if you want money for your corporation to serve your burgesses, here, look the list, go and collect the taxes. This is a devious plan to enable corruption and oppression at the grassroots level. Where are the checks and balances? Where's the accountability? Where's the oversight to ensure that the collection process is fair, equitable, and just, and not fraught with corruption? That one person, to make sure that one person is not being squeezed while another person is getting an ease up. This government has been a total failure at diversifying the economy, at generating wealth for this country, at creating different disparate revenue streams, at supporting the citizens of the country. The PNM has denied the people of this country their very patrimony. They are entirely devoid of the intellectual capital required to create and implement any successful strategic plan for economic recovery. All they know how to do is tax people, squeeze people, inflict hardship on people, and appoint Vasan to try and help them. They come here to do exactly that in the name of local government reform, and the UNC cries shame, stop. Bring good legislation that is there for the people, to serve the people, and is about the people. This bill and the Property Taxes Act is amended by inserting, notwithstanding subsection 1, tax on residential land shall be paid to the municipal corporation in which the residential land is located. Very interesting. So if your property falls within different municipalities, you have to file paperwork and pay taxes in each one? Is that an efficient process? We talk about online, But when the Honorable Minister of Digitalization was appointed, he did not even have a website for his ministry. And you are talking about online. How can we get online when there is no online, when a tender cannot even be done efficiently by UDICOT for a hospital project? So people with land in different corporations have to go and line up 14 separate times. Is that efficient, or is that putting a burden on the taxpayer already in a situation where once you get into a car in Trinidad and Tobago, you know you're going to lose at least a productive hour or two? Confidentiality. Confidentiality of residential tax information. We are on record here as hearing a member of the PNM government saying that citizens don't have a right to privacy. But confidentiality of residential tax information. How many people will now have access to individual citizens' personal financial information? In a time of kidnapping, robberies, extortion, this is putting persons at further risk just for their own personal hard work and success, for investing their earnings in property. We are now allowing a greater number of people access to personal records. We have actually ministers in the court now trying to protect their personal information. We have leaked special branch investigations, FIU, we have ACIB information coming out, but yet this government is going to create more avenues for the escape of private information of citizens. That cannot make sense. It does not make sense, and it is downright dangerous. And you come to put a Mickey Mouse clause here about confidentiality of information in 77.2 and 77.3 in a country where absolutely nothing remains confidential. So you see, whether it's a special branch report, ACIB, FIU, merit list, with absolutely no consequence whatsoever, this information gets out and people know about a list before it even reaches the president to intercept it. This is laughable, given that probably nobody here can say when was the last time any person was charged or faced punitive measures for leaking confidential information into the public domain. The public, and rightfully so, has no confidence.
Senator Roberts. 46-1 upheld on the terms of relevance to the debate.
Section 77.2, Mr. Vice President, where this government is in this local government reform, Madam Minister of Trade, is saying that the taxes and the property taxes, people have to go to their corporations where the land exists, and therefore people's private information, instead of being held at the BIR or in the future coming, the Revenue Authority, people's information will now be in a number of different corporations and different places. Therefore, the greater numbers of human beings will have access to people's private information, and therefore there is greater risk of leakage of people getting information that they should not have and putting the citizens at risk, ma'am. So I would like you to follow what I'm saying. The public, and rightfully so, has no confidence in the government's word. I mean, at the highest echelons, high-ranking PNM government officials go in courts of law in foreign lands and sign affidavits replete with total falsehoods, while others claim to have never...
Mr. Vice President, 46-1.
Senator Roberts, this is the second time I'm going to mention 46-1. I'm asking you to keep your contributions tighter to the debate at hand. You're going way off the mark by bringing too much wide connotations.
Thank you for your guidance, Mr. Vice President. Section 77.2, where information is forwarded to a municipal corporation for the purpose of the collection of property taxes in relation to residential land the municipal corporation, the council of the municipal corporation, and staff of the municipal corporation shall keep information confidential. Could we have confidence in that, Mr. Vice President? All of those people are being told here by the PNM, the information forwarded to a municipal corporation for the purpose of the collection of property taxes in relation to residential land. The municipal corporation, the council of the municipal corporation, the staff of the municipal corporation, it's best you give the gardener, the wakaman, and the doublesman all of people's private information. And you come to say in a clause that it shall be held confidential. Your cabinet cannot even keep secret from your meeting. Everything has come out and the UNCs find out. Not disclose such information unless authorized to do so under this act. Section 3.
Senator, we understand the point you're making.
Yes.
Just ask that you keep it a little tighter now.
All right. Thank you very much.
Closing on your wind-up.
Oh, good. Time already? I was just beginning to enjoy myself. Section 108, draft estimates to be submitted to the Minister of Finance for his approval, and the Minister with responsibility for finance may make such amendments thereto as he may consider expedient. And this is what the PNM is coming to say is devolution and decentralization, when you have a Minister of Finance who could just determine without ever going to a corporation like Pinet de Bal and saying he doesn't know how many people live in Pinet de Bal. He's never been there. He doesn't know if it has backhoe, if it needs diesel, how many people are there. But he will determine how much money the people of Pinet de Bal get. That could never be right. That is not devolution. That is authoritarian. That is undemocratic and oppressive. As I said, Property Taxes Act Amended 3, notwithstanding subsection 1, the minister may by order declare which of the agricultural, industrial, or commercial taxes may be collected by the municipal corporations and what percentage.
Allow your colleague to contribute, please.
The Minister of Finance could determine what taxes may be collected by the municipal corporations and what percentage of those taxes collected may be retained by the municipal corporation. This right now, there's a Minister of Finance who does not pay VAT refunds unless he feels like it. He takes it as a strategy, as a zero interest loan, and only when there's a windfall from
46.6, please, Mr. Vice President, 46.6.
Member Roberts, unless you have proof of this, we have to uphold 46.6.
Of course, they have proof, Mr. Vice President.
Can you keep it relevant?
Yes,
keep it relevant.
In the debate, Mr. Vice President, that we just had, if the Honorable Minister of Tourism would take the time to read the Hansard
Mr.
of
Vice
his
President,
Honorable
he is
colleague.
imputing improper motives, 46.6, please. And please, could you ask the member to direct all his contribution to you? I don't want him speaking to me.
Oh, good.
Member Roberts, 46.6 upheld. Keep your contributions towards the debate with lack of conjecture and direct all.
Thank you.
Reminded.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Emotions high in the sky. Poor fellas. So, Mr. Vice President, in the debate that we just had for the mid-year review, the Honorable Minister of Finance showed that due to the windfall from the war in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia, that he was now going to pay $1.7 billion of VAT refunds. And he had shown and has shown over the last 7 years, if the Honorable Minister of Tourism was paying attention, then he may have understood. And then other ministers would not run all over his portfolio to negotiate sandals deals. But the mayor, the alderman, and the councillors shall be eligible for such remuneration as may be determined by the minister with responsibility for finance in consultation with the chief personal officer. What the Minister of Finance in this bill does not want to control, he then leaves for his colleague, the Minister of Local Government, to do so. In Schedule 13, it is amazing that this local government bill gives the control and choice to the Minister of Local Government, who it takes away out of the fight for resources. But when whatever scarce resources are managed to be scraped out by those who are left on their own to fight with the Minister of Finance, this bill then says the Minister of Local Government, who did not help to get the resources, could now come to a corporation and in 13 areas, including road and drain maintenance, could come and dictate where the money must go. That is authoritarian, that is oppressive, that is dictatorial. The Honorable Minister of Local Government said in his contribution that this is a better way of the people governing themselves, that it's a dare to dream and just start philosophy. Well, really, this local government reform bill drowns dreams and takes us backward. They put more power into, the Honorable Minister said it will put more power into the local government hands, but they have been a generational failure in the local government reform. They say that we consulted for 3 decades. However, it is this deaf, hardened PNM that has brought an oppressive dictatorial bill that ignored the views of thousands of people, 300,000 on Facebook, according to the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development. Yet they ignored the people, they ignored the people, they ignored the people. Mr. Vice President, soon this government will be forced to call an election, and the UNC under Kamla Prasad Bisesa stands ready to reform local government in a way that will serve the people, serve the people, serve the people. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Before I call on the next speaker, which should be about third to last, I just remind members, if you have any amendments to make, please follow the to the law. Please, to the bill. Please submit it accordingly how it is supposed to be done. Thank you. Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, we are today assembled to engage in a meaningful discussion on a subject which transcends individual interest and which allows us to embrace the exchange of ideas and dreams, yes, dreams, on a concept which is at the very core of our existence, community. In this exchange, Mr. Vice President, we commit to the people's business to pass the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2020. I use the word transcend deliberately for 3 reasons, since that word means literally, quote, to be or go beyond the range or limits of a field of activity or conceptual sphere, unquote. Firstly, with this bill we endorse and are enriched by the lessons learned from the historical antecedents where we are to be of the well-meaning work accomplished in the field of local government since the first post-independence Synonym Committee, a history already well articulated by all previous contributors to this debate. Secondly, our being goes beyond our lessons learned from our history, is arguably unprecedented. By expanse, I refer to the scope of the national legislation which has been overhauled. One only has to look at the long title of the bill. It is an act to amend the Municipal Corporations Act, the Burial Grounds Act, the Cremation Act, Advertisements Regulation Act, the Recreation Grounds and Pastures Act, the Highways Act, the Dogs Act, the Property Taxes Act, and the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act. By expanse, I refer to the scope of national legislation which has been overhauled. By depth of and degree, I refer in particular to the very comprehensive national consultation which is epitomized by the work of the Joint Select Committee, whose report we have before us. Thirdly, Mr. Vice President, the conceptual sphere which this bill engages and seeks to articulate is to do more than to just remove the red tape and bureaucracy that hinders, some may say frustrates, local government bodies from doing their work in an efficient and effective manner. The bill outlines this government's vision to give significant and meaningful autonomy to municipalities by giving them the executive authority to manage and govern their affairs in the interest of and with meaningful participation of communities. Save to adopt, which I do, I need not repeat what has already been addressed by honorable members on the government side, but at the risk of seeming preferential, I take the opportunity today to salute and to adopt the comprehensive, meaningful, and eloquent maiden remarks of Senator Lawrence Hislop, who treated us on our first occasion to a compelling treatise on the precedent set already for this bill by the Tobago House of Assembly enabling legislative framework. Some of the key features of this bill, Mr. President, propose major cornerstones with the introduction of an executive council to supplement the existing municipal structures. There will now be provision for the following, for example, better appropriation, auditing, and accountability of funds with the involvement of auditors in accordance with the new subsection 3A, safeguarding the wealth of the people for the people, with the Minister of Finance having authorization with the advice of the Auditor General to retain the services of an external auditor or the Auditor General to perform audit activities of the corporation. Another feature, the independent management of operations through new standing committees, analogous to joint select committees of the Parliament. Importantly, Section 68(3) of the unofficial consolidation, which is page 41 of the bill before us, quote, a council may appoint persons not being members of council to any standing committee, and such persons may take part in the deliberations of such standing committee, but shall not vote. That is to say, the members of civil society are being given an opportunity to participate meaningfully in the deliberations of those committees which will run the municipal corporations for the betterment of the community. Another feature, the involvement of persons from the community, including the very civil society, as part of the audit committee, which persons can also be elected as the chairman of that committee, as is provided for in section 69(5) and subsection 5 and subsection 8 respectively. This empowers and demonstrates independent oversight of the management of funding from civil society. The inclusion of chief officers who are to report directly to the chief executive officers of the corporations. Funding to be sourced from, among other places, property tax collections. A game changer, Mr. Vice President, a game changer which the opposition fears, and while they will resist every move of this government to get the property tax regime up and running. We have to pause and reflect on that. We pause and we reflect. By the allowing of property tax to finance the activities of the municipal corporations, this is money being collected by the revenue authorities, the people's taxes, placed in the charge of the people through their communities to improve their access to and management of meaningful empowerment. That is why I've used the word transcend. This bill transcends most previous attempts at meaningful change within the communities. Mr. Vice President, a brief history of the bill tells us that the bill has been under development for quite some time. The first attempt at local government reform in our post-independent era was assigned to the Synanon Committee in 1965, whose main recommendations were the need for a greater role and prominence of local government in the democratic and developmental processes. 2, the decentralization of key functions to local government. 3, the empowerment of communities to play more meaningful roles in the management of their assets. The work of this committee led to the enactment of the County Councils Act 1967, and we have continued since then to attempt to improve local government's enabling infrastructure. In 1974, the Hewooden Constitution Commission commenced to address constitutional reform. at both local and central governmental authorities. In 1983, there was another attempt by the People's National Movement, which published a policy paper on community development and local government reform for public comment. Again, this government was committed to promote greater participation in national government through local government authorities. In 1989, the National Alliance for Reconstruction produced a policy paper outlining proposals. After public discussion, a bill was drafted, debated, and passed in Parliament in 1990, the Municipal Corporations Act 21 of 1990, which was proclaimed in 1991. That act consolidated all the available local pieces of government election. When the People's National Movement returned to office in 1991, and with its success at the 1992 local government elections, that act was amended by Act Number 8 of 1992 to now reflect 2 cities, 3 boroughs, and 9 regions. The next major attempt at reform was in 2002 under the People's National Movement, which again engaged in extensive consultation throughout all municipalities. Subsequently, several policy documents were developed, including a draft white paper in 2009. A bill was also prepared, the Local Government Bill 2010. And then finally, in 2020, may it please you, Mr. Vice President, the PNM government brought forward the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2020, which was sent to a joint select committee for consultation and amendments. So here we are today, Mr. Vice President, the report of that joint select committee. Several stakeholders have taken part in a very thorough national consultation process. The consultative process of people sharing ideas and listening to each other. The Arima Borough Corporation, the Auditor General's Department, Miaro Rio Claro Regional Corporation, Ministry of Finance, Board of Inland Revenue Division, Ministry of Finance, Valuation Division, Ministry of Planning and Development, Mr. Paul Richards, independent senator, whose contributions are always so well prepared, thoughtful, and indicative of a commitment to national development. National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago, the Pinal Debe Corporation, the Point Fortin Borough Corporation, the Port of Spain Corporation, the San Fernando City Corporation, the San Juan Lavantil Regional Corporation, the Siparia Regional Corporation, Statutory Authorities Service Commission, the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Local Government, and the Water and Sewerage Authority. That was the breadth and the depth of the national consultation, and indeed it went further. In that period in 2002, when the government had gone out for a national consultation, we are reminded that there have been other reports and consultations done by a plethora of stakeholders. One such stakeholder is the NGO known as Trinidad and Tobago Citizens Agenda Network, TNT-CAN, whose coordinator, Mrs. Sheila Solomon, produced a comprehensive report following consultations across the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago in 2003, giving detailed recommendations for the transformation of local government, including proposals for a citizens' agenda, infrastructure and physical planning, human resources, participatory structure, including the legal framework and best practice for councils and committees, and relations with central government. These recommendations, in fact, now form part of the current bill before us, and I have personally provided a copy of that report to the Minister for Rural Development and Local Government. Mrs. Solomon's mantra was, among others, quote, "Serious listening produces understanding and an appreciation of how ideas can complement each other rather than conflict," unquote. In everything that has been said in this debate, and in particular in the work of the Joint Select Committee and its report which has been brought here today, that mantra remains true. In our engagement with each other, Mr. Vice President, on this debate, we have heard from previous contributions of honorable members on this side, and indeed from independent senators. We've also heard from the opposition. Today I have had the privilege to listen to the Minister of Agriculture, Senator Mr. Kazim Hussain, whose comprehensive understanding of and involvement in the reality of local government in practical terms speaks volumes for the substantive value of what this bill means. I am humbled, Mr. Vice President. Today I sat and listened. I appreciated and I was educated. I salute Senator Hussein's contribution and wholly and gratefully endorse it. Our national community of Trinidad and Tobago is in good hands, and the road being charted by this bill promises a meaningful and fruitful journey to citizen participation and empowerment. Mr. Vice President, the committee recommended that its report be adopted. This was done on the 23rd of May 2022 in the House of Representatives. And so we are here today. I ask your leave today to pay tribute to one of our founding fathers, Sir Hugh Woodin, who in another context, on the 18th of February, 1967, on the occasion of his acceptance of an honorary doctorate at the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, said this, in words which today yet still ring clear and true in this conversation in which we are engaged, open quotation marks. The call is for community effort. No democracy can survive, let alone triumph, which is not a cohesive community under law, a society of men and brethren working together with common purpose and seeking the common good, unquote. Mr. Vice President, today we as a parliament are entrusted with the constitutional authority and the mandate to pass the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Bill 2020. The time is now. We have been traveling this road since 1965. The process has been thorough and inclusive. It is imperative that we take the initiative to affirm the results and recommendations coming out of the process heralded by the report of the Joint Select Committee to supply our municipal corporations with the necessary tools to transcend and to operate and to function to the best of their ability. This is a fundamental step in empowerment for the peoples of Trinidad and Tobago in each of our communities and for our national community. Mr. Vice President, I thank you.
Senator Varma Deyalsingh.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for allowing me to participate on this bill, an act to amend the Municipal Corporations Act, Chapter 2504, the Burial Grounds Act, the Cremations Act, Chapter 3051, the Advertisement Regulation Act, the Recreation Grounds and Pastures Act, the Highways Act, Property Taxes, and Planning and Facilitation of Development Act. So I am very pleased to be partaking in this discussion today. You see, so the regional corporation plays what I might say a real aspect in the person's life, day-to-day living. The fact that, as mentioned by Senator Varma Deyalsingh, that, you know, she steps out her house, the road is there, she goes by her doubles. Every aspect of our community starts with the regional corporation. So they definitely have such an important role to play. And as I am pleased that I live under the corporation, the Tunapuna Piarco Regional Corporation, and I must say there are good things, but there's also things in the community I see the need for improvement. So while I look at our community, I must say that we have been honored to have the support of the councillor, Seema Ramsaran, and also we have the Kwasi Robinson. The chairman has also have been there and has given us a lot of support when we make any sort of representations that we need. So at this point, I may say, how does it affect me? Well, definitely in my day-to-day running, you find that, you know, the garbage collection I look at the collection of the bush, grass cuttings. I look at the cesspit collection, when they come in to clean the cesspit. Those are things that affect people besides the roads, besides the drainage. So I must say, I have to say, I'm pleased about our garbage collection, and I'm pleased to say about the collection of the bush. You always have guys come in and claiming that the load is too much, and if you give them a little 100 extra, they would move it. So we always have these little squabbles in our community when these persons in these trucks come and try to get a little more from the residents. But we do complain. We do have the air. And I must say we are pleased to have our councillor and our member of parliament of the area, Member Amin, and Mr. Robertson, also on our WhatsApp neighborhood chat. So this is something where anything can happen in our area. We have the ears of those persons. And this is, I think, the way that this bill can actually give the members of the public a little more say, a little more, reaching the ears of those persons to say, listen, things are not going right. And if that accomplishes, this is accomplished in the bill, I think it would be a success. However, there are still challenges with drainage. So sometimes we have the drains in the area, and it's sometimes, you call the corporation, and you may hear it's works department responsibility, and another person may say it's public health to come and clean the drains. The next person will come and say, well, the CPEP is just for the verge. So we have that difficulty. The neighbors have that difficulty, and it's there. And the minister is here today, so he would realize, and I'm sure he realizes that, that is some complaints. And I don't know if this bill, giving more powers to the corporations, would actually solve that for us. Because you will always have the idea, if there's too many cooks responsible for something, one may point fingers and say it's not me, it's him. And you will have that issues occurring, and it's the residents, the citizens who are actually caught up in this mess. So sometimes these are things that we have to fix. The drainage, who's responsible, who will come out, who will do it. Because remember, dengue season will be here soon. The roads, we've heard about the roads. And again, when we call for the roads, we hear some roads would be under the Ministry of Works and Transport, other works will be to the corporation. Then WASA will come and dig up the road, and we will hear that WASA has a road repair program. So there are all these entities, but yet still we are missing the deliverance. So 3 sets of entities for drains, but each will have their own areas to clean. Different persons for the roads, but again, there's the actual, each of them have their own territory. So we need somehow to fix this, and if the corporation could somehow liaise better with these entities, I think we would actually get some relief in the community. So I'm saying, even before Senator Hillsop made that claim that Tobago had this going for a while, I must say I was always jealous of Tobago. When I go there and I see the place looking clean, the grass cut, I see the roads looking well, I have always said, well, those persons there, they have something that we don't have here. They have probably a pride in their community, probably the mechanisms they have in place. And with all this bill here, if this bill is passed, I'm saying, yes, there are benefits, but if we have the same persons working in the corporations with the same work ethics, I don't think we will go further. So therefore, with this bill has to come a mindset where we are now giving that responsibility to the workers there to act better, to perform better. Because non-performers may not be changing, they may not have any motive to change. And so therefore failure may really be that same players, same work ethics, and we may have the same sort of deliverables coming there where people may still be complaining. So when I looked a little further at this bill, I want to just touch on a few aspects of it. I want to touch on the aspect that you would have made mention that the 35I-D states that the corporation would be responsible for the maintenance of government schools and also the maintenance of government schools and also any sort of schools within their area. And we just wanted some clarifications, because remember there is the maintenance training unit, the MTS, which goes in and provide cleaning services to the schools also. And I would wonder, in what way would they get involved? Where they say, well, I mean, is it that if the MTS would be not available, or will they be pushed out of that for the school cleaning program, if we now have the corporations coming full up with their cleaning activities and maintenance? So this is a question I wanted to find out. Who would be responsible for the schools? So therefore, definitely, if persons will have a problem in the schools that they go in and there's no sanitation, especially now that COVID is around, and children are out in full, some parents may have concerns, even before the COVID pandemic, about the state of the toilets in the schools. Some parents would have concerns about the water, the sanitation. Now, especially in the pandemic, we need to be clear. Is it the corporations in charge of making my children's school a clean area? Is it the government schools? Is it a maintenance training unit? You see, if a child gets the virus in school and succumbs, and the parent wants to take legal action, he may have to know, who should I direct it to? Could it be Ministry of Education? Could it be a cleaning company? So I look at 35J and A, where it looked at the disaster management. And you know, rainy season is here, floods will come about. In my area, we have flooding, thankfully. A few bad weather we had recently. We were not, I might say, we didn't have that level of flooding that we expected, and I think that's thanks to the cleaning of the Varma River, but that has to be maintained. So when I'm looking at the disaster management, something here that is very important, and what's important here is the fact that in a disaster, you have the corporation now having that part to play. And a few years ago, with the ODPM, as a practitioner in mental health, we had made a motion that all our mentally ill patients, we should have a sort of demographic mapping of them. So in case of a disaster, in case there was even that blackout recently, you would know your population who is vulnerable. And this is where I think the corporation has a great part to play in this aspect of it. You see, the corporation with the councillors should know their community. They should know who in a community lives alone, which elderly person, which blind person there. And that lays all with the councillors. And having that disaster management unit, the ODPM, be on track. So in case there's a flood, you would know there's a home, there's an individual there, maybe mentally ill, maybe trapped, may not be able to come out, a blind person living alone. And this, I think, it's something that if we get this going properly, it will be to the benefit of our population. I also want to make mention to the fact that the Minister of Family and Social Development did come out in her contribution, excellent contribution. She's doing an excellent work. I congratulate her. And while she mentioned domestic violence, I want to make a little plug there also. You see, we have had the gender-based violence unit, but we still have a gap where persons may have issues in their homes behind closed doors. Government will not be responsible for that. They would not know what's happening there. The crimes that is committed by domestic violence, they wouldn't know. Highly dependent on relatives actually warning us. Highly dependent on co-workers saying that the woman is now isolated. Highly dependent also on the neighbors. So therefore, I've always said we need a Marcosius society. We need a society of Marcos who could look and say, hey, my neighbor is now fighting, they're quarreling, it's causing a problem. By you able to now call the municipal police, you might be able to get that police to come into that area more often. Just a presence of a police officer coming and knocking at your door, how are you, what's going on, could lead someone to reach out for help, to escape. So I support the measure, I support this venture, what the minister said, that the municipal police could help. But remember, even before that, we had community policing. We had, and somehow it dwindled away. It's still there in some areas. Then we had the community patrols, but they used to pass, and they were excellent in the sense that if you see somebody in the area, a strange car, you could call them as well as call a security company if you have one in your area. But all those grand plans were there, but it fizzled out. So even though I'm seeing that we even have the gender-based violence unit, who we can also call, we can also reach out. Any additional help with the municipal police coming on board, I think if you have more of them, they may be able to help this, and it's something I think the country would benefit from if it is handled in a proper manner where they would be able to spread out in the community. I also would like to make mention to the fact that the minister made mention that the municipal police may be able to help against the gang violence and whatnot, but I'm thinking they are not so equipped. The gangs now are so armed with such sophisticated weapons. If our municipal police are not armed properly, this is a dangerous venture for them. That should be left to the traditional police, who will have their anti-gang units and the weapons to go after. The municipal police could be walking areas, see if there's a drug den, make reports, also be reporting to the normal police officers. So just their presence around the community may give someone a degree of comfort. The minister also made mention, and also I think section 35H made mention, where there's a division, has to have a division with a responsibility for community development and social services. So with the pandemic, with poverty, with unemployment, we are seeing there's a great need to reach out for individuals. And if the corporation could now help or be of an assistance to the central government, the family and social services, this aspect they will definitely be able to reach other citizens who are in need. I must say, when the minister touched the aspect of homeless persons, I was a bit, it brought back memories, Mr. Vice President. You see, I think it was when the NAR had now come into power, there was a body established in Riverside Plaza to deal with the homeless. I was the doctor there that was appointed by, I think Selwyn Richardson was the minister at the time who appointed me, and it was Mr. Steve Solomon from the Catholic Church, and also Krishna Maharaj, who was a psychologist. And our job really was to look at the homeless in Port of Spain. And we did everything like track those persons. We knew who had mental illness. We knew who we could have, who needed medical attention. But when there was a change in government, that fizzled away. So therefore, this issue of social displaced persons is something for years I've seen the country battling with it, trying to grapple with it. And we definitely, if the regional corporations will now have a greater a degree of ability to look at these homeless persons, map them out in the area. If you look at Sawa, Mr. Vice President, on the Quaysay, there are a lot of homeless persons there just lying down, right? People blame St. Anne's Hospital and say we're not picking them, but the minister knows it's a legal issue, it's a medical issue, the laws may need to be changed, but I think even sleeping on the public space, the corporation with their municipal police could come and say, hey, get out of there. But we really have to provide homes. We really have to provide homes for the homeless, just as how Riverside Plaza was an area. The corporations now, in their planning and their money they get from property taxes, will have to factor in the fact that you could give us like a home where homeless people could go out in the day, do what they have to do, but come back in the night, get a safe place, or have that. So we have to develop these in each corporation. And while I make mention to this, sir, is that the importance of the corporation and having a greater autonomy is something that they need to develop, because the Minister of Health and previous Ministers of Health has also mentioned that they were going to decentralize, deinstitutionalize St. Anne's Hospital. St. Anne's Hospital has around 600 to 700 patients living in there, chronic long-stay patients. Some relatives don't want them. Sometimes they are there for years. Some of them will die there. It's a great cost for the taxpayers to be maintaining those individuals there. And globally, the trust has been to deinstitutionalize, to put persons back in the community where they belong. So there are two things with this. One, if suddenly we don't prepare, the corporations do not prepare places for these persons, and you have a lot of persons coming out there, and you will end up in a state where New York had their persons going and living in boxes and in the cities. So therefore, definitely the corporation will have to factor in the fact that the Minister of Health has already mentioned this. The mental health team has already been looking to put persons in homes, but as a community aspect, we don't want social distress, where these persons now, the corporations now, making the place look nice, tidying up, doing their best to make the community better, but you have persons walking out of these homes that we put them in outside and going into the society causing distress. So this is something they will have to factor in any sort of monies that they receive. Clause 7 speaks about the recreational, grounds and having recreational grounds. And why I make mention to this is, in our chat, as I mentioned, we have a WhatsApp chat where there is the councillor Jaylin Rupnarang from Curep area. She had a distress call out in club where the Newell Street recreational grounds, I think it was on the holiday, I think it was April the 30th, around there. She said thousands of persons descended under the ground. Her persons called her and blamed her and said, how could you allow persons to have loud music, drinking alcohol? And remember the regulations on mass wearing was still there. So she made mention that she was distressed because the neighbors around that Newell Street recreational ground complained to her. They were saying she was to blame. And it ended up that, unfortunately, a lot of the individuals there were migrant population, a lot of Venezuelans were there, and they seemed to have caused distress to the residents on Newell Street. So it was after this, after the chairman of the regional corporation got involved, we realized that somehow there was a lapse, a mistake. People may have applied to use the grounds for one reason, but were using it for different reasons. So the recreational grounds, the maintenance, the power to keep it in such a safe, nice way for other people around, not to cause a nuisance, it's very important. And I mentioned this because with a mental distress people are having, people need safe areas, not safe areas from COVID, but safe areas where you can carry your families. The boardwalk in Caranage was something, a dream. I had dreamt that, you could go there, park up there, police would be there, you walk with your child, you feel safe, you come back, your car wouldn't be stolen. So in each corporation, we have to now develop the mindset that we could provide safe places where you have guards, you have the municipal police there. I could go and picnic in the ground, not being fearful of somebody stealing my car or some socially dispersed person coming to try to attack me or cause a nuisance. So the clause 7 with the recreational grounds, I'm thinking it's important to the new world we want to create to give people those spaces where they are safe with their relatives. Certain areas in the beaches people can have, you go in there without loud music. Certain areas, and like if there's a park, you maintain it. And this is where I think it's important again for the corporations to realize the important role they play in maintaining these areas, recreational grounds, which could have an effect of helping persons deal with their stress. Safe places where we can go. And I saw in the Etihad grounds, remember there's a place where you can go in the car park and you could buy food, and you can go in the grounds and you can have a relatively safe area. But we need to maintain it where families can go without any fear for crime happening. So I look at now 35E, where we looked at the public health environment waste. And when I was young, I remember Charlie was the cartoon character Charlie was, that they pushed to get rid of garbage and to clear up the streets and whatnot. I see Charlie has now returned, So I'm seeing Charlie coming back in ads, and the message there is to try to get people to recycle. And the recycling initiatives is very important for the corporation. The fact that we had Charlie, we had litter wardens, all these things we had before, but we realize when there's a flood and we see what's happening in the drains, what's coming down, the sort of styrofoam pollution, people dumping stuff. This rule here of when Section 35E2 speaks on their duty is to also to hire litter wardens. We need more litter wardens, right through to be looking at the area, to be having the power to tell persons, pick up your derelict vehicles. I must commend the Minister of the local government recently, where he had a cleanup campaign where persons were allowed to put all their large rubbish and garbage outside. So people put mattresses and they put the fridges, old stove. These are things we need to continue from time to time because people will accumulate it and you are giving them an opportunity where they can come. So I thank you, Minister, for that, and it's something I'm hoping every 3 months, 6 months, we could continue that initiative. I also look at the 35E, where we looked at the control of insects, rodents, very important. Because you see, what I must say and the new portfolio also given to the, I think it's a Director of Health, very important role. Because you see, Mr. Vice President, in my area where I live, we do have a problem with cats, dogs, people dump cats, and there's a lot of cats will multiply, and kittens, and they get big. And so we have cats, we have dogs, stray dogs, we have rats. And as you are well aware with your medical background, Mr. Vice President, in South now there's the outbreak of rabies. We wouldn't want any sort of rabies to find its way, because I think the Minister of Agriculture did mention the vampire bats are biting and giving cattle in South rabies. If that spreads to our community and dogs get rabies, we would be in for some problems in our communities where we are now exposed to rabies via our dogs. So therefore, rodents needs control because of the fact of leptospirosis being there. And I must say, the new role given to the Director of Health, I guess we have somebody else now, we could now go knocking on his door and said, listen, even though there was the health officer there before, I think the Director of Health there would be someone who we could now approach directly and say, hey, we need to have the rodents control. And they do come. When we apply, we do get persons coming from the corporation putting rat traps. So it's not to say it's not there. I think an issue people are complaining now is the spraying, that I think we made some applications to our councillor to see about spraying for mosquitoes. So very important role. Very important role I've seen that the corporation has. I also want to make mention of this, that when you look at 35E1, where the corporation could investigate public health complaints and abating of nuisances. Now, this is something I'm looking at. So, a nuisance. We have noise pollution. Persons are complaining after the COVID, is like the whole country has gone wild. People will play music loud in the night. You're having parties sometimes occurring. Persons cannot sleep. And it's a public health issue. If I want to sleep at night and have my 8 hours rest to be mentally fit next day, and you are getting that noise pollution in the area. If you have persons having, sometimes a long holiday, you want to rest, and you cannot rest in your own homes. So that level of noise pollution that we are seeing, that level of complaint. There was a body recently established, an NGO, to actually make sort of whip up support against noise pollution. So the corporation has to realize that they are close by. Now, I've spoken to the Commissioner of Police already and EMA, and there seem to have been a lack of the monitors, these noise devices to get the level of the sound. So this important rule for the health of persons who are trying to sleep, elderly persons who can't sleep, persons who are studying, persons with babies, persons who have mental health, who need their rest in their homes, because your home is an area where you should choose to just get away from the world. The corporation may have to liaise with the EMA, liaise with the police officers, teach their municipal officers how to have these noise meters, how to measure it, and also hoping this is something that could at least help the population who has been complaining. I also would like to make mention of 35EB, which made mention of it. A corporation also would have to deal with the distribution of water in areas as requested, subject to the Water and Sewerage Act. Now, there are some areas where there may be a shortage of water. And sometimes, WASA has given us a number to call if you want water to be delivered in tanks that they could come. But sometimes you call, sometimes you don't get, sometimes it's challenging. So if the corporation can now take up this mantle again, where persons are without water for a certain period of time, I'm certainly thinking water is such an essential service, especially with COVID. You need water to wash your hands. The corporations could now come and step in to any sort of a gap that WASA has and are not able to supply tank-borne water to individuals. An issue I'd like to check on too is 35FG speaks of the issuing of building approvals, applications for land development, not more than 20 lots, as considered for sample dwellings. Now, the approvals. This is something that I always had problems with in terms of, and I'm talking about a practical aspect. You're driving down Crep Main Road. You're driving down Arangres Main Road. Those main roads are access points from the southern main road to the highway. So therefore, if they are blocked up in cases of emergency, what are people to do? And sometimes, Mr. Vice President, I have seen cars parked indiscriminately. So a car may park on one side of the road, the next one on the other side, and you have to kind of maneuver around cars, and the traffic is coming in both directions. And we asked, why were buildings given approval to have bars, to have supermarkets, and they are not given the parking spaces available? And people park on the road. And this is something I am hoping the corporation would now come into play. If you are now giving people approvals, if you are now giving people applications to build certain areas, once it's on a main road, we have to have something better. Either they park on the side streets, or you do not give approvals for buildings that are going to cause, again, social distress, people having to reach home, reach a school. And another thing I may want to make mention is that in any sort of a planning, as members here would know, you have to allocate a certain percentage of your land to green space. And I've seen a lot of houses now, they simply cut all their grass, take their grass and concrete their whole place, cut down their trees. So you're actually now in breach of this. And I think this is something for the global warming. This is something that we have to realize it's going to affect us if we do not somehow look at that regulation and say, listen, you have to ensure that you have that green space, a certain acreage, a certain part of your land dedicated to greenery. And this is something we have to get serious about. Besides looking at the space in terms of the green space allowed, trees or grass, and not allowing people to cut it down and just make concrete jungles. Were unfortunate, Mr. Vice President, where sliding gates fell on children. We had unfortunate instances where persons had pools and children drowned in the pools. And if we had a proper planning sort of a division, a home inspectorate, any persons going to put a sliding gate should have to get the corporation permission, should have to do it in a particular way. Anyone who's going to have a pool should have it barrier. There are certain regulations. You have to put barriers there, certain warnings, block it around with a fence. These are simple things that the corporation has to realize. That I have been counseling 2 families whose gates fell on their children, one recently and 1 year ago. These are disasters that we could avoid. And the corporation could now have a way they could go in and inspect and say, listen, you put in a gate, you have to do it in a particular manner. You're thinking about a pool, you have to have that barrier. So it's important. It's an important role they play for the safety of our children. That planning aspect, I'm saying. Again, a plea I want to make for the corporations, we need public toilets. You may go into Crib Junction and you have no toilet. You need public bathrooms somewhere along the way where people, there are elderly population now. A gentleman who had prostate enlargement, he may now want to stop and use a washroom. So it's simple. So we have to scatter that in the corporations at certain areas. And this is something I'm hoping that they could take heed of in view of our aging population who would need that facility. I also took note of the Minister of Family and Social Development when she made the plea for Mr. Terry Rondon, who's very active, involved over 40 years. So I totally agree with her. All those councillors there, all those persons, servers, aldermen, they should have a pension. They should have, as I'm saying, they should have their jobs being paid excellent. We bother them all hours in the night. Miss Seema Ramson is in our WhatsApp group, and neighbors will put a WhatsApp message about the cat missing or the parrot gone missing. Nonsense like that, it's important to the neighbors, but you're waking up the councillor. So, we have to realize that the councillors work 24 hours sometimes. They are there for our well-being. During the COVID pandemic, they distributed things. So they should be remunerated, and I have no problem with they getting the remuneration. But with that comes responsibility. You have to be more responsible to what you're doing to the pleas of the people, to the plights of the people. Remember, even our past first female Prime Minister, Ms. Kamala Prasad Biswas, she started, and I think the corporation. Past Attorney General Gavin Nicholas started in a corporate serving. So, it serves as an area where they can progress to these national, national portfolios. And even when they were serving then, I am sure we should have been able to give them that remuneration because they are working hard, and I have to welcome that move. I also welcome Clause 9, which looked at amending the Dogs Act, Section 8.5, because remember recently in Real Spring and Nuge, a police officer had to shoot a dog coming on the road. So this officer jogged in, took out his gun, had to shoot this dog, rushing him. Regrettably, it happened. So the persons have to have that responsibility. So this increase in fees to have your dog on a leash, if they are unleashed, also without any sort of if you have your dogs running around in the road and disturbing people, I welcome this. I also look at I must make mention the Section 68 mentions the standing committees, and I think the standing committees are important to be visible so persons will know who they are. Who are those persons in the standing committees who may allow a party to be running for a few, in a recreational area with noise pollution? Who are those persons in public?
Senator, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you. You need to see planning going haywire. So we need to have a face to those people, and Section 69 should have those committees, especially in the infrastructural development, maintenance, public health, recreational grounds, public spaces, the planning. Those persons, are responsible. If they are not doing their job properly, this will result in social distress, and I think they should be there where persons can now ask them, why are certain things not running properly? I must say the Section 77, I give me concern as it gave Senator Roberts concern, where now you see your private information, taxpayers, the BIR will be giving it to the corporations. Now, some people work hard, some people buy properties, some people have a lot of properties. And, we have to be careful with information. Remember, some people have gone banks, withdrawn money and got robbed. So imagine now if BIR information is now sitting in a corporation office where people could say, well, you own 5 properties and you may be targeted by criminals. So I share Senator Roberts' concern for that. I also felt uncomfortable with 109, where, you're given the powers of the corporations to borrow and also even to get monies from foreign states and agencies. Right now, it has made mention that the corporations are not up to mark in their bookkeeping. So definitely, if they are going to borrow money, how do we know 14 corporations will borrow money, will do some very hairy project, and next minute it goes haywire, and the taxpayers now will have to bear the brunt of this. So I am uncomfortable with persons who had given the history of not giving good financial accounts for before to now be borrowing. I think we have to have some better scrutiny for this. I must say, though, I would like to make mention that the Joint Select Committee, in my opinion, did an excellent job where they looked at certain aspects, they saw certain needs to improve, to strengthen, and in the hard work they done, I must commend them. I must say that even in the implementation now, we realize the important job the corporation has with property tax. Something I mentioned, Mr. Vice President, Clause 10 serves that the property tax collected will go back into the community. But if it's a community like, say, Sandy Grande, who may not have affluent house residences to get a great property tax, you may be continuing that cycle there where you're keeping that community down, because it's not like, say, like you go Bayshore and you're getting a lot of money in your property taxes. So that system is somehow keep that cycle of poverty, unless we develop certain affluent areas in those communities where we can get more property tax. So in conclusion, I say, Member Senator Hazel Ahi's fair that how could we connect the NGOs to the corporations. We're already doing that with our WhatsApp group, and I think hopefully this bill will add and augment that, and we could get something better out of this. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senators, we are suspending the Senate for 30 minutes. We would resume at 5:15.